What if vampires were never monsters, but teachers? What if the darkness they lived in wasn't evil, but misunderstood? Tonight, you're about to hear 10 The Dark Vampire, a dark fantasy story that blends mystery with science, history, and moral truth. This is not a tale of mindless bloodlust, but of knowledge, restraint, and the cost of immortality. Every shadow hides a lesson. Every chapter reveals why fear exists, and how understanding can defeat it. Listen closely, because this story was written to make you think. Thank you to viewers. Thank you for being here and supporting meaningful storytelling. Your time, curiosity, and presence give these stories life. Enjoy the journey into the dark. Shadows of Origin, The Dark Vampire. The night had teeth. It sank them into the cobblestone streets of Valenreach, where fog curled like living things around gaslit lanterns and the moon hid behind a veil of ash-gray clouds. Few dared walk after dusk, and those who did learned to keep their eyes lowered and their hearts quiet. The city had learned, over centuries of whispered disappearances, that darkness listened. From the highest spire of the ruined cathedral, Cale watched. He stood unmoving at the edge of the stone gargoyle, his cloak dissolving into the night as though it were born from shadow itself. Below him, the city breathed, slow, fearful, unaware of the predator observing it. Cale's crimson eyes glimmered faintly, not with hunger alone, but with memory. He did not always hunt. Once, long ago, he had been something else. A scream echoed through the fog. Sure. Cut off too quickly. Cale's jaw tightened. He vanished from the spire, leaving only a ripple in the air where he had stood. The alley was narrow, slick with rain and rot. A man lay slumped against the brick wall, his breath rattling like broken glass. Standing over him was a creature barely recognizable as human, its skin pale and stretched, eyes feral, mouth stained red. A fledgling. Newly turned. Reckless. Cale emerged from the shadows behind it. Enough, he said, his voice calm but heavy with command. The fledgling spun around, hissing. He's mine. You've fed, Cale replied, glancing at the blood pooling on the stones. And you've broken the first law. The creature laughed, high and unhinged. Laws are for the weak. Cale moved. In less than a heartbeat, his hand was at the fledgling's throat, lifting it effortlessly. The alley darkened as shadows bent inward, responding to Cale's presence like obedient servants. You mistake restraint for weakness, Cale said quietly. With a sharp twist, the fledgling's neck snapped. The body crumpled into ash before it hit the ground. Cale turned to the dying man. He knelt, pressing 2 fingers lightly to the man's temple. A whisper escaped his lips, ancient words older than the city itself. The man's breathing slowed. His eyes glazed, fear dissolving into emptiness. You will remember nothing, Cale murmured. Moments later, the man slept, alive but untouched by truth. Cale rose and vanished once more. The cathedral crypt lay beneath layers of broken stone and forgotten prayers. It was here, in this underground hollow of cold marble and dust, that Cale allowed himself stillness. Torches ignited as he entered, their flames bowing low as if in reverence. At the center of the chamber stood a black stone sarcophagus, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly when Cale approached. His origin. He rested a hand against the stone, and the past surged forward, unbidden. Fire. Screams. The stench of blood and burning flesh. Cale had been human once. Calen Maris, son of a scholar, apprenticed to the arcane arts. He remembered the night clearly, the sky split by lightning, the cult's chanting echoing through the forest ruins, his father's body lying still at his feet. They had bound Cale to the altar, carving sigils into his skin, not to kill him, but to open something ancient. Something hungry. When the Dark One answered, it did not take Cale's life. It took his death. Agony beyond measure tore through him as shadows poured into his veins, rewriting him cell by cell, soul by soul. He had begged. He had screamed. He had broken. And when he rose, the cultists lay dead around him, drained, twisted, emptied. Thus the Dark Vampire was born. Cale stepped back from the sarcophagus, the memory fading like embers in ash. Centuries had passed since that night, yet the weight of it never lessened. Immortality did not dull pain, it refined it. A presence stirred at the edge of the crypt. You're restless, came a voice smooth and knowing. Celine emerged from the shadows, her silver hair catching the torchlight, her eyes glowing a soft violet. Ancient like Kale, but untouched by the darkness that clung to him. The fledglings grow bolder, Kale said. They forget what we are. What you are, Celine corrected gently. They don't fear the dark vampire. They doubt his mercy. Kale's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. Mercy was never part of the curse. Celine approached, her gaze flicking to the sarcophagus. The council senses a shift. The old blood stirs. Kale turned sharply. How? Someone is searching for the origin ritual, she said. The one that created you. The torches flared violently. No one must repeat it, Kale growled. Not ever. Celine met his gaze without flinching. Then the shadows will follow you again. They always did. Above ground, thunder rolled across Valenreach as Kale stepped back into the night. Rain began to fall, hissing against stone and shadow. Somewhere in the city, a bell tolled midnight. Kale lifted his face to the storm. If someone sought to awaken the darkness that birthed him, they would learn the truth written in blood and night. The dark vampire was not a legend. Blood and biology. The blood tasted wrong. Not spoiled, vampires could detect rot from across a room, but altered like a familiar melody played in the wrong key. Lucien froze mid-draw, the goblet still pressed to his lips, every ancient instinct screaming warning. He lowered the silver cup and stared at the crimson surface. It shimmered faintly in the candlelight, too bright, too alive. Human blood was warm, metallic, rich with fear or desire. This was sharper, cleaner, almost engineered. He should have stopped drinking long ago. Across the chamber, Dr. Ilara Voss watched him with clinical fascination, her hands folded behind her back. She wore no protective charms, no crosses or wards, just a white lab coat over black silk, an insultingly mundane garment in a castle older than most nations. Well, she asked. You felt it? Lucien's fangs retracted slowly. What did you put in it? Ilara smiled, not with malice but with triumph. Nothing mystical. That's the point. He rose from the carved obsidian chair, movements fluid despite the sudden tension coiling through his body. You brought me blood that doesn't belong to any living human, he said. That alone is grounds for your execution. And yet, she replied calmly, your heart rate has increased. Your pupils are constricting. And for the first time in 3 centuries, your body is reacting instead of merely enduring. Lucien clenched his jaw. Vampires did not have heart rates. Not in the human sense. And yet he felt it. A subtle rhythmic pressure in his chest, like an echo of a life long buried. Ilara stepped closer, undeterred by the predator standing before her. Your kind calls it magic. Curses. Divine punishment. But what if vampirism is biological? A pathogen. A symbiotic alteration of human DNA. You're suggesting I'm diseased, Lucien said softly. I'm suggesting you're alive, she countered. That word struck harder than any blade. Lucien turned away, pacing toward the tall, arched windows. Outside, the forest writhed in moonlight, branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. I died in 1649, he said. I remember the blade. I remember the priest's prayers failing. I remember waking with blood in my mouth and hunger in my bones. Do not tell me I'm alive. Ilara's voice softened. Biology doesn't care about theology. Your cells still replicate, slowly. Your neurons still fire. Something in your blood arrests decay and enhances regeneration. That something can be studied. He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Studied. Like an insect pinned to velvet. I didn't come to kill you, she said. I came to understand you. Lucien faced her again. And the blood. She inhaled, clearly savoring the moment. A synthetic analog. Human blood grown in vitro, modified with CRISPR-based markers to interact with vampiric hemoglobin. His eyes narrowed. You tested it on me without consent. You would have refused, Ilara said simply. And the results are too important. Lucien felt it now, heat spreading through his limbs, not the fiery rush of feeding but something steadier. His senses sharpened beyond their usual razor edge. He could hear Ilara's breathing, yes, but also the faint electrical hum of her equipment behind the walls. He could smell iron in the stone, ancient and forgotten. What did it do to me? He asked. It stimulated dormant pathways, she said. Your blood responded as if it recognized the markers. As if it remembered being human. Silence pressed in around them. Impossible, Lucien said. Uncomfortable, Elara corrected. She moved to the table where her instruments lay arranged with surgical precision, vials, syringes, a portable centrifuge humming softly. Every vampire myth talks about blood as sustenance, as power. But blood is information. It carries history, lineage, instructions. Lucien watched her hands, aware that he could cross the room and kill her in less than a second. And yet he didn't move. Your kind stagnates, she continued. Immortal, unchanging. But biology hates stasis. That's why the hunger never fades. Your body is trying to evolve and has nowhere to go. You're saying we're unfinished, Lucien said. I'm saying you're a prototype. That, more than anything, unsettled him. A sudden pain lanced through his arm. He hissed, gripping the stone balustrade as dark veins briefly surfaced beneath his skin, glowing faintly red before fading. Elara's eyes widened, not with fear but awe. There. That reaction, that's new. Lucien rounded on her, eyes blazing. You're playing with forces you don't understand. I understand enough, she said, though her voice trembled now. Enough to know that this could change everything. No more blood farms. No more hiding in shadows. Vampires who can walk in daylight without burning. Who don't need to kill to survive. He stared at her, the weight of centuries pressing down on his thoughts. Daylight. Warmth. The absence of hunger. Dreams not stained red. And what would you want in return? He asked. Elara hesitated for the first time. Access, she said. Samples. Time. And protection. Your elders would tear me apart if they knew what I've done. They will, Lucien said. They already sense something is different. As if summoned by his words, a low vibration rippled through the castle stones, a warning pulse ancient and unmistakable. Elara swallowed. Then decide quickly. Am I your prisoner, or your partner? Lucien looked at the goblet of altered blood, still half full. At the scientist who dared reduce his curse to code and cells. At his own trembling hand, alive in a way it had not been for hundreds of years. The Curse of Immortality. The first sign that something was wrong was not the pain. Elric had known pain all his life, known it in the bite of winter wind across the moors, in the blistering heat of forged steel, in the hollow ache of hunger that came when coin ran thin. Pain, he had learned, was honest. It announced itself, demanded attention, then eventually faded. This was different. He woke beneath the shattered arches of the old sanctuary, dawn light filtering through vines and broken stone. His body felt quiet. Too quiet. The spear that had pierced his chest the night before lay snapped beside him, its head dark with dried blood. His blood. He sat up slowly, expecting the familiar lightning of agony. It never came. Elric pressed trembling fingers to his chest. The tunic was torn, the skin beneath unbroken save for a faint, silvery scar shaped like a leaf. He traced it once, then again, breath shallow. I died, he whispered. Memory returned in jagged fragments. The ambush in the ravine, the cultists chanting in a language that tasted like ash, the woman of light stepping from the altar's heart. He remembered her eyes most clearly, ancient, sorrowful, and fixed upon him as if he were both salvation and mistake. Life, she had said. Or perhaps she had said endure. Elric rose to his feet. His legs held without protest. Around him, the sanctuary was still, save for birdsong and the distant rush of water. The cultists were gone. No bodies. No sign of struggle. Only him. He staggered toward the pool at the sanctuary's center. The water was clear enough to serve as a mirror. The face that stared back was his, dark hair tangled, eyes the same storm gray, but something else lingered beneath the surface. A depth. A stillness that did not belong to the living. He splashed water onto his face. It was cold. He felt it. He felt everything. And yet, Elric drew the knife from his belt. He hesitated only a moment before slicing his palm. Blood welled instantly, bright red. He watched, heart pounding, as the wound closed before a single drop fell. The knife clattered to the stone. No, he said louder now, the word cracking. No, no, no. Immortality was a myth whispered by drunkards and desperate kings. A curse reserved for villains and children's tales. It was not meant for men like him. Men who had planned to die quietly someday, perhaps in a warm bed, perhaps on a battlefield, but always someday. Footsteps echoed behind him. Elric spun, knife back in hand. An old man emerged from the shadows, bent beneath a pack of herbs and scrolls. His robes were patched and sun-faded, his beard white as frost. "I was hoping you'd still be here," the man said mildly. "Dead men rarely linger." Elric lunged, blade flashing toward the man's throat. The old man did not move. The knife stopped an inch from his skin, held fast by an unseen force. Elric strained, muscles screaming, but it was like pushing against a mountain. "That won't work," the man said. "On either of us." Elric released the knife and stumbled back. "Who are you?" "Mehron," the man replied. "Keeper of mistakes." Elric laughed once, sharp and hysterical. "Then you've come to the right place." Mehron studied him with unsettling intensity. "You were not meant to survive the ritual. Yet here I am." "Yes," Mehron said softly. "That is the problem." They sat by the pool as the sun climbed higher. Mehron spoke of the sanctuary, of the goddess bound there long ago, of the cult that sought to drain her final strength. Elric listened, numb, until the truth settled like lead in his gut. "She bound herself to me," Elric said. "She bound time away from you," Mehron corrected. "Your body will not decay. Wounds will not claim you. Disease will flee. Even age will forget you." Elric swallowed. "And death." Mehron met his gaze. "Death will try." Repeatedly. Silence stretched between them. "How do I undo it?" Elric asked at last. Mehron looked away. "You don't." The word hit harder than any blade. Elric stood abruptly, pacing. "There has to be a way. A ritual. A counter-curse." "There are legends," Mehron admitted. "Fragments. Most involve gods who no longer answer prayers, or prices so steep they break the soul before the body." Elric stopped. "Tell me." "In time," Mehron said. "You will have plenty of it." The cruelty of the phrase was unintentional, which made it worse. Days passed. Then weeks. Elric tested the limits of his condition with grim determination. Fire blistered his skin, then healed. A fall from the cliffs shattered bones that reknit before the pain could fade. He did not need to eat, though hunger gnawed at him if he did not. He did not need sleep, though exhaustion haunted his thoughts. People aged. Elric did not. He watched a village grow around the sanctuary ruins, watched children become parents and parents become memories. He learned to leave before questions formed, before whispers turned to fear. Loneliness, he discovered, was the true punishment. Years later, decades perhaps, he stood on a hill overlooking a city of stone and glass. Mehron was long gone now, his grave unmarked, his bones dust. Elric remained. Immortality did not feel like power. It felt like erosion. Every bond was temporary. Every love carried an expiration he alone could see. As the sun set, Elric touched the faint scar on his chest. "Endure," he murmured, tasting the bitterness of the word. And for the first time since waking beneath the sanctuary's broken arches, he wondered whether eternity was not a gift to be escaped, but a sentence to be served. Fear is a teacher. The night had a weight to it, thick and suffocating, pressing against the walls of the abandoned chapel where I had taken refuge. Moonlight seeped through the fractured stained glass windows, scattering shards of color across the cold stone floor. Every shadow seemed alive, writhing just beyond the edges of my vision. I should have been afraid, and yet I welcomed it. Fear was not an enemy, it was a teacher, and tonight, it was about to show me lessons I could not afford to ignore. I had been hunting for months, tracking whispers of a creature older than the city itself, a predator whose name had been lost to time. They called it the Revenant, a vampire rumored to feed not just on blood but on terror. Legend said that those who encountered it felt their worst nightmares crawl into their very bones, twisting reality until there was no difference between waking and dreaming. I didn't believe in legends. I believed in fear, and I believed in the power that came from facing it head-on. My heart thudded against my ribcage, steady and relentless, but my mind was sharper than any blade. The stories had told me how the Revenant hunted. It mirrored its victims' deepest anxieties, taking form from what frightened them most. Tonight I would find out if they were true. I had trained for years, learned to control my body, to calm my mind, but some fears were not rational, and no amount of discipline could prepare one for the shape of pure terror. A sudden sound cut through the silence, a whispering hiss like silk scraping over stone. I froze, listening. My pulse quickened as I realized it came from every direction at once, yet nowhere in particular. The air grew colder and a pungent scent of decay filled my nostrils. My instincts screamed to run, to flee the chapel, but I did not move. Fear, I reminded myself, was not a weakness. It was a teacher. It demanded attention and I would obey. From the shadows a figure emerged. It was not fully human, yet not entirely monstrous either. Its skin shimmered with an unnatural pallor, eyes glinting like shards of obsidian. It tilted its head as if studying me, assessing, learning. I felt the weight of its gaze deep in my chest, an invisible hand pressing against my heart, demanding surrender. My breath caught, but I held it steady. I refused to show it the tremor in my limbs. "You feel it." The Revenant's voice was a melody of silk and steel, echoing in the corners of the chapel. "The fear that lingers in every heartbeat. You taste it like a fine wine, though you would never admit it aloud." I took a slow step forward. "I do not fear you." The creature's smile was a slow, predatory curl. "Ah, but fear is already here," it whispered. "It lives in you. In every shadow, in every memory. I am merely its reflection." Then the walls themselves seemed to pulse, breathing with a life of their own. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming grotesque shapes that mimicked my childhood nightmares. The narrow hallways of my old home, doors slamming shut without warning, a voice calling my name from empty rooms. I could feel my knees weaken, my resolve tested. And yet I did not fall. I had promised myself I would not. "Fear teaches," the Revenant murmured, gliding closer with a grace that defied reality. "Fear shows the truth. It strips away illusions, leaving only what is necessary to survive. Look at yourself, human. What do you see?" I stared into the mirror of shadows it conjured, into the versions of myself I had buried long ago, the boy trembling in the corner of a cruel classroom, the teenager hiding from his own reflection, the young hunter uncertain of his path. Each version reached for me, pleading for mercy. I felt my stomach twist, but I did not turn away. I had learned the first lesson of fear: acknowledgement, not denial. "You resist," the Revenant said, tilting its head, amused. "Most crumble. Most run. But you walk willingly into the abyss." I could feel the tension in the chapel reaching its breaking point, the air vibrating with the pulse of an ancient, hungry life. I knew what came next. Fear would escalate, testing me further, pressing on the raw nerve of my spirit. My eyes darted around, searching for the slightest advantage, the faintest glimmer of weakness in this predator. And in that moment I understood the second lesson. Fear sharpens, it teaches strategy. Every heartbeat, every shiver in my spine was data. I could read it, use it, survive it. The Revenant laughed, a sound like glass shattering in water, and the shadows condensed, forming a monstrous duplicate of myself. Its eyes were my own, filled with doubt and panic. "Do you see now?" it hissed. "This is who you truly are. You cannot hide from me." I raised my hand, and in that small gesture I made a choice. I did not strike, but I did not flee. I inhaled the fear, let it wash over me like cold rain, and then I expelled it. My voice rang out in the chapel, steady and commanding. "I am not my fear." The shadow faltered. It hesitated, then dissipated like smoke in the wind. The Revenant recoiled slightly, a glimmer of curiosity in its obsidian eyes. It circled me once, twice, testing, and I realized the final lesson of the night. Power is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. To face terror is not to be fearless. It is to stand firm when the world insists you crumble. "You have learned," the Revenant said softly, almost approvingly. "Not everyone survives such lessons." I nodded, chest heaving but resolute. The moonlight now seemed less oppressive, the shadows less threatening. The fear had not vanished, it never would, but I had learned to harness it. To see it for what it was, a guide, a mirror, a teacher. And in that moment, I knew the path ahead would be darker, more treacherous, but I would face it with eyes wide open. The Revenant stepped back into the gloom, melting into the shadows like smoke drawn into the night. I felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation, as though a door had closed and another had quietly opened. Fear had spoken and I had listened. And in its voice, I had found the strength to continue. I left the chapel at dawn, the first rays of sunlight weak against the lingering night. But I carried the darkness with me, not as a burden but as a weapon. Fear would remain my teacher, the Revenant my most formidable lesson, and the world, bloody, merciless and beautiful, would learn that I had mastered what it had once used to break me. the science of darkness. The laboratory smelled of iron and old parchment, a metallic tang that clung to the walls like a shadow. Candles flickered in sconces, their flames dancing across glass vials filled with liquids that shimmered with unnatural colors. Dr. Elias Thorne, the foremost researcher of nocturnal biology, moved with careful precision, his black coat brushing against the floor as he examined a sample under the microscope. The experiment before him was unprecedented. For centuries, the world had whispered of vampires in hushed tones, relegating their existence to myths and superstition. But Dr. Thorne knew better. He had dedicated his life to proving what no one else dared acknowledge, that vampires were not creatures of folklore but of science, creatures whose very biology had evolved to exploit the night. On the table lay the specimen. Pale, almost translucent skin stretched over sharp bone, veins pulsing with a substance that glowed faintly under ultraviolet light. The sample had been obtained with extreme care from a subject that, for reasons of safety and secrecy, remained unnamed. Thorne's gloved hands moved with precision, taking measurements, adjusting instruments, and recording data in a leather-bound journal. Every observation was meticulous, down to the minute quiver of the creature's pulse. "Fascinating," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "The hematopoietic composition is unlike anything in mammals, no, unlike anything in vertebrates at all. The hemoglobin is unstable, reactive, almost predatory." He adjusted the microscope lens, leaning closer. The red blood cells of the vampire glinted like rubies, moving with a sentience that seemed almost conscious. Thorne's mind raced with possibilities. Could the blood itself be a weapon, a tool of predation and survival? Could this be the key to the creature's legendary strength and longevity? Outside the laboratory, the night pressed against the windows. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, and the moon hung low in the sky, full and commanding. Thorne glanced at it, feeling the familiar tingle of anticipation. Vampires were creatures of darkness, yet their existence was a paradox. They thrived in absence, yet they were defined by presence, the power they wielded in shadowed silence. The door creaked, and Thorne looked up to see his assistant, Mara, step inside. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had been with him for 3 years, assisting in experiments that had pushed the limits of ethics, legality, and human comprehension. "Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice a soft whisper, "I finished analyzing the neural samples from last night's subject. The results are extraordinary." Thorne's curiosity piqued. "Show me." Mara laid out a series of charts, brain scans, and microscopic images. The neural tissue of the vampire displayed structures that defied conventional understanding. Synapses fired in patterns that resembled a hybrid of mammalian and insectoid nervous systems. Memory and instinct were entwined in a web of hyper-efficient connections, allowing rapid calculation, prediction, and reaction. "Look at this," Mara said, pointing to a glowing section. "The prefrontal cortex is expanded. But the limbic system, its emotion center, is minimal. Rationality dominates, yet it's guided by a predator's instinct. There's no human empathy here." Thorne nodded, absorbing the implications. The creature was not simply a human gone rogue or cursed, it was evolution accelerated and twisted by unknown forces. They were apex predators designed to manipulate, control, and survive. Their intelligence was precise, cruelly efficient, and terrifying. "Which means," Thorne said, his voice low, almost reverent, "our understanding of life, of morality, even of mortality is incomplete. These beings exist in a framework that we can barely perceive. They are both science and art, anatomy and strategy." Mara shivered, glancing toward the shadows at the edge of the lab. "Do you ever worry that studying them might be dangerous? That they might?" "They won't find us," Thorne interrupted firmly. "We're careful. Controlled. We observe, we record, we understand. Knowledge is power, Mara. And one day, it may be the only thing that keeps us alive." He returned to the microscope, adjusting the focus again. Beneath the lens, he could see the subtle changes in the creature's cells as they reacted to light, to temperature, to the chemical solutions he introduced. Every reaction was calculated, every adaptation precise. It was a biology honed for survival, a testament to evolution under conditions that humans could scarcely imagine. Yet Thorne knew there was more to it than just physiology. There was the matter of influence, The way these creatures moved through the world like predators in a symphony of darkness. They had allies and enemies, adherents and victims. History was littered with the remnants of their presence, veiled as folklore, religion, and superstition. Their impact on humanity was subtle but profound, a predator shaping prey without ever being seen. A sudden chill swept through the lab, and Thorne felt the hairs on his neck stand on end. He looked toward the shadows, half expecting to see movement. But the room was empty, save for Mara, who seemed equally tense. "They sense it," she whispered. Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Sense what?" "The intrusion. Some awareness beyond our observation. I felt it just now. A presence not human, observing." Thorne frowned, but a small, sharp thrill ran through him. This was the line he had been dancing around for years. The point where science met instinct, where observation became interaction. To study a predator was one thing. To provoke it even subtly was quite another. He straightened, glancing once more at the slides before him. "We proceed cautiously," he said, voice steady. "Every experiment, every observation must be precise. But we cannot shy away. The science of darkness is not a field for the timid. It demands courage and sacrifice." Mara nodded, swallowing hard. "And if we fail?" Thorne smiled, a thin, cold line. "Failure is not an option. But even if it were, knowledge is never wasted. Every secret we uncover is another step closer to understanding, and understanding is survival." He turned back to the microscope, losing himself in the minute universe within the specimen. Blood, nerve, and bone intertwined in a rhythm older than civilization itself. Outside, the night deepened, and the moon cast silver beams across the laboratory floor. Somewhere beyond the walls, in the shadows Thorne could not see, eyes glimmered with a hunger that was both animal and intelligent. But inside the lab there was only science. Observation, measurement, calculation. And the unshakable certainty that the night held more secrets than any man had yet dared to uncover. A pact with knowledge. The night had a way of wrapping itself around the city, thick and suffocating, as if the darkness itself wanted to listen. Raylan moved through the alleyways with a practiced silence, her boots making no sound on the slick cobblestones. Even in the shadow of the moon, the city felt alive, whispering secrets that only a few could hear. Tonight, she was seeking knowledge that came with a price she had long feared to pay. In the heart of the oldest district, where the street lamps flickered like dying stars, Raylan found the door she had been told to seek. It was unremarkable, almost invisible, hidden between the ruins of a crumbling apothecary and a shuttered tea house. Yet she knew it would lead her to him, the dark vampire known as Valtherus, a being whose thirst for knowledge was only rivaled by his hunger for power. Raylan took a deep breath and knocked. 3 sharp raps echoed into the darkness. There was a long pause, then the faintest click as the door creaked open. "You've come," a voice said, smooth as silk but sharp as a dagger. Valtherus's eyes gleamed red in the shadows, reflecting a light that shouldn't exist in the dead of night. His presence was overwhelming, a gravitational pull that threatened to drag her into the depths of her own fears. "I need your guidance," Raylan said, keeping her voice steady even as her pulse quickened. "There are truths I must know, truths about the Order and about the darkness that's rising." Valtherus tilted his head, studying her like a predator observing prey. "Truth comes at a cost," he murmured. "And knowledge, true knowledge, demands a pact. Are you prepared to pay?" Raylan hesitated. She had heard whispers of what he asked from those who sought him. Not wealth, not power, not loyalty. He wanted something far more intimate, a fragment of one's soul, an offering of memory or desire. But if she was to have any chance of stopping what was coming, she had no choice. "I am," she said, voice firm. "I'll give what's necessary." Valtherus's smile was both inviting and terrifying. "Very well. Then step inside." The interior was nothing like the alley suggested. The room was vast, walls lined with shelves of ancient tomes, scrolls, and artifacts that seemed to hum with a quiet energy. Candles floated midair, casting a dim glow over the polished obsidian floor. The air smelled of old paper, incense, and something darker, something alive. "Sit," Valtherus commanded, gesturing to a chair that seemed carved from the shadows themselves. Raylan obeyed, feeling the chill of the seat seep into her bones. "You wish to know the truth of the Order," he began, his voice wrapping around her mind like a silken rope. But the truth is not a single thing. It is layered, fragmented, and dangerous. And you are not unscarred. Every piece of knowledge I give will take from you something in return. What do you want from me? Raylan asked, though she already feared the answer. Memories, Valtherus said simply. Moments you hold most dear. Not just thoughts, but the essence of their weight upon your soul. You will forget them, and in return, you will see the unseen, hear the unheard, and understand the forbidden. Raylan's heart clenched. Memories of her family, of nights spent laughing under the stars, of the first time she had held a blade in her hand, each one called to her, tethered to her very being. Yet the threat of the darkness made her decision. I will, she whispered. Valtherus nodded, and the air thickened around them. Shadows swirled, wrapping around Raylan like living silk, and she felt her mind stretch, pulling out fragments of herself she had never thought could be touched. The first memory to slip was a quiet morning with her brother, sunlight spilling over their shared breakfast. The warmth faded, leaving a cold emptiness behind. Do not fear the loss, Valtherus murmured, his voice a caress in the dark. Memory is but a vessel. Its absence makes room for truths to enter. Raylan felt the knowledge crawl into her mind, small at first, like a whisper at the edge of hearing, then roaring, overwhelming, impossible to contain. She saw visions of the Order as it truly was, not protectors of humanity, but wardens of secrets so terrible that their suppression had been necessary for centuries. She saw rituals that bent time, experiments that twisted flesh and spirit alike, and a prophecy that spoke of a darkness not yet arrived, but growing, fed by fear, hunger, and ambition. And then she saw him, Valtherus, not just as a vampire, but as a being older than nations, older than kings, carrying knowledge no mortal was meant to hold. His life had been a series of choices, sacrifices, and pacts, each one leaving a scar upon his soul. She understood, in that instant, that he was both the keeper and the danger, the solution and the threat. You see, Valtherus said softly, knowledge is not safe. It is a blade. It can free you or it can destroy you. How you wield it, that is your choice. Raylan swallowed, the weight of revelation pressing against her chest. She had come seeking power, but now she realized power came with responsibility, and with the shadow of loss. Her memories were gone, irretrievable, but the truths she now carried could guide her, could arm her, could prepare her for the coming storm. I understand, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. But, why help me? Valtherus's eyes gleamed, and for a moment Raylan saw something she had not expected. A trace of humanity, of longing, perhaps even of regret. Because I am bound by curiosity as much as by hunger. Because someone must witness what is to come. And perhaps, he added, a faint smile curling his lips, because I see in you the spark of something remarkable. The shadows receded, the room returning to its quiet, expectant stillness. Raylan rose, feeling the emptiness of her lost memories, yet carrying the weight of knowledge far heavier than any she had known. Go now, Valtherus said, his voice softer but still commanding. The path ahead is perilous. And remember, a pact with knowledge is never complete. It demands vigilance, courage, and above all, sacrifice. Raylan nodded. She stepped back into the night, the city welcoming her with the same whispers, but now she walked among them with eyes that could see beyond the veil. Every shadow seemed to pulse with hidden truths, every sound carried a message, and every corner held a choice. She did not look back, though she knew she would never forget the darkness that had given her sight. Somewhere in the distance, a low howl split the air, a reminder that the storm was coming and she had to be ready. The night wrapped around her like a cloak, and Raylan walked forward, alone yet armed, her soul forever changed, bound by the pact she had made. Knowledge had a price and she had paid it. And in the quiet of the city, Valtherus watched from the shadows, his red eyes glowing like embers, knowing the game had only just begun. The moral hunger. The night pressed in like a velvet shroud, suffocating yet comforting, a paradox Max had long since stopped questioning. He moved through the abandoned streets of the city with the precision of a predator and the quiet dread of someone haunted from within. The thirst was gnawing again, sharper this time, but it was not just the craving for blood, it was the gnawing of his conscience, an insistent moral hunger that no mortal meal could sate. He paused in the shadow of a crumbling building, the moonlight painting his pale face in silver streaks. Around him, the city was asleep, oblivious to the monsters it harbored, and in that oblivion lay both safety and temptation. Max clenched his fists, nails biting into the soft flesh of his palms, a futile attempt to anchor himself to something human. He had fed only 3 nights ago, yet the hunger returned as though mocking him, whispering promises of relief in a voice that was all his own. Blood was never just blood. It carried memory, emotion, life itself. Every sip was an intimacy that left a mark on him, a stain no soap could cleanse. The thought made him recoil now, shaking off a memory of last week's feeding, the young man with laugh lines and a hopeful gaze, now lifeless and still. Max remembered the heat of his veins under Max's fangs, the taste of fear and innocence mixing like fire and honey. He shuddered. He was a predator, yes, but one who had learned too late that the act of survival could never truly erase guilt. He moved on, silent, slipping down alleys where the shadows wrapped around him like old friends. The city seemed different tonight, quieter somehow, as if it too sensed the weight he carried. He could feel the pull of human warmth from inside the buildings, each one a potential sin, each one a temptation he was not sure he could resist. Hunger and morality warred inside him, 2 beasts circling in a cage that had no walls. At the edge of the park he paused again. The fountain, cracked and dry, caught the moonlight in its jagged basin. Max crouched, elbows resting on his knees, hands pressed against his temples. He had been walking for hours, chasing ghosts of restraint, trying to outrun what he was becoming. And yet, the moral hunger, the need to preserve what little of his soul remained, gnawed more than the physical thirst ever could. "Why do you fight it?" a voice whispered in his mind, soft, coaxing, familiar. Max's eyes snapped open, scanning the shadows. The voice was not real, could not be, but it was persistent like a pulse at the base of his skull. "Because if I don't," he muttered aloud, "I'm already lost." The city breathed around him, indifferent. And yet, there it was again, that voice, now a subtle thrill in the darkness. It called to the part of him that wanted to surrender, that wanted the hunger to end no matter the cost. To drink deeply, to forget the rules he had tried so hard to live by. Max could feel the pull in his chest, like an ache that demanded obedience. He pressed his hands to his throat, feeling the beat of his own pulse, hot and insistent, a mockery of his restraint. And then he saw her. She was standing under a flickering street lamp at the far end of the park, as though she had stepped out of the shadows themselves. Young, innocent in her movements, a careless smile tugging at the corner of her lips as she spoke to someone who was not there, or perhaps to the night itself. Max froze. It had been months since he had encountered someone like her, someone whose life seemed untouched by the darkness that had claimed him. He knew he could not feed on her, not yet. Not today. But the moral hunger twisted inside him like a living thing, whispering about choices and consequences, about restraint and release. Max took a step forward, then another, careful to remain in the deeper shadows. He wanted to run, to flee the temptation, but part of him hungered for the connection, the fleeting warmth of human life so close it could almost be tasted. He stopped just beyond the rim of the light, watching, waiting, balancing on the knife edge between predator and conscience. The girl laughed softly, and the sound struck Max like a physical blow. It reminded him of everything he had lost: humanity, friends, family, the life that had once been his. His teeth itched, the craving sharpened into a white-hot torment. He knew if he let himself move closer, even an inch, it would be a betrayal of the moral code he clung to with trembling hands. And yet he could not turn away. Max sank to the ground behind a low wall, head in his hands. The moral hunger was worse than the physical one. It demanded thought, reflection, the consideration of every potential choice and consequence. Feeding would solve nothing. It would only fill the emptiness temporarily and leave him emptier still. He thought of the last time he had given in, the scream, the fear, the life extinguished, and he realized the weight of that memory would last longer than any satisfaction. He hated himself in that instant, hated the creature he had become, hated the way the hunger never truly ended. Hours passed, though time had no real meaning to him anymore. The girl eventually moved on, her laughter fading into the distance. Max remained unmoving, wrapped in the cold embrace of the night. The moral hunger, relentless and insistent, gnawed at him still, a reminder that survival without conscience was hollow. Finally he stood, shaking off the residue of temptation and guilt. His shadow stretched long on the cracked pavement, a distorted reflection of a man he barely recognized. The city would never forgive him, nor would he forgive himself, Yet he had chosen for now to honor the fragile fragments of morality that remained within him. Max walked away from the park, the moral hunger still with him, a constant companion in the night. He did not know if he would ever find peace, or if restraint would ever feel like victory, but he carried on. After all, the hunger could be endured, it could not be sated without consequence. And in that endurance lay the only hope he had left. The night swallowed him whole, but Max walked on, shadows clinging to his heels, and the moral hunger whispering that the hardest battles were not fought in blood, but in the choices one refused to make. Teaching the children. The candlelight flickered across the ancient stone walls of the hidden chamber, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and iron, a reminder of the centuries that had passed since this room had last known warmth or laughter. Yet tonight, the silence was broken, not by the echo of footsteps or the whisper of ghosts, but by the soft, careful breaths of the children who sat cross-legged on the cold floor. Lucien, the dark vampire, stood at the front, a figure both commanding and terrifying. His presence was like a shadow given form. Black robes draped his lean body, and his eyes glimmered crimson, reflecting the flames in an almost predatory way. He had chosen this moment carefully. The children, orphans of the city, some no older than 10, some older than 14, had no knowledge of what he was, only whispers of the night, of stories told to scare them. But now they would learn. Sit still. Lucien's voice was a low rumble, smooth yet edged with an authority that brooked no argument. The children obeyed instantly. There was an instinctive fear in them, a sense that disobedience could cost more than just punishment. Lucien liked that. Fear was a teacher's most honest tool. He moved among them slowly, a shadow gliding over the stones. His hand hovered over the first child, a boy with wide, frightened eyes. "Do you know why you are here?" Lucien asked. The boy shook his head. Lucien's smile was thin, cruel in its elegance. "Because the world you live in is fragile. Weak. And weak things are consumed by those who are strong." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. One by one, he passed the other children, letting the weight of his gaze press upon them. Each sensed it differently, some with fear, some with awe, and others with an unexplainable pull, a fascination that made their hearts beat faster. Lucien observed quietly, noting those who flinched, those who met his gaze, and those who seemed almost hungry. When he returned to the center of the room, he placed his hands on the edge of an ancient table, the surface scratched and pitted with age. "Tonight," he said, "you will learn the truth about yourselves, about the world, about what lies beyond the veil of the sunlit streets you call life." A whisper of a child broke the silence. Are you a monster?" Lucien's head tilted, amused. "Monster? Perhaps. Or perhaps simply what you have never dared to become." He paused, letting his words sink into their minds like seeds in dark soil. "I am your teacher. And like all teachers, I will shape you. You will learn to embrace what others fear. You will learn to control it. And you will learn that power is never given, it is taken." He stepped back, raising his hands in a slow, deliberate motion. Shadows in the corners seemed to quiver and lengthen as if answering to him. The children gasped, some instinctively moving closer to one another. Lucien's eyes flicked over them, noting the faint tremors of fear, but also curiosity. Fear was good, but hunger was better. "You will learn to see in darkness," he continued, his voice almost a whisper now, drawing them in. "Not just the darkness around you, but the darkness inside yourselves. Most fear it, reject it, hide from it. But not you. Not tonight." He reached for a small vial on the table, filled with a liquid as black as the shadows that clung to the corners of the room. "This is the first lesson," he said, holding it aloft. "It is not blood. Not yet. But it is truth. The truth of who you are." The children watched, wide-eyed, as he uncorked the vial. The liquid shimmered, catching the candlelight and refracting it into strange, haunting patterns on the walls. He poured a single drop into his own mouth and paused, savoring the moment. "Feel it," he said. "Imagine what it would be like to move as the shadows move. To strike without hesitation. To be more than human." Some of the children recoiled instinctively, yet others leaned forward, drawn by the irresistible promise in his words. Lucien's smile widened ever so slightly. He could sense it, the potential. Some of them already hungered for it, even if they didn't know what it was yet. The first step, he continued, is to shed weakness. Fear will come and go, but weakness must be removed entirely. Watch. He extended his hand, and the shadows around the room coalesced into a thin, twisting shape. It moved with a life of its own, curling and striking like a serpent. One of the older children flinched, and the shadow lunged toward the boy. But Lucien's hand intercepted it, dissipating it instantly. The child exhaled shakily, trembling from the thrill and terror of the display. You see, Lucien said, power is not in denying fear. Power is in controlling it, in bending it. Tonight you will begin to learn control. Hours passed. Lucien guided them through exercises that tested their senses, their reflexes, their patience, and their courage. Some failed spectacularly, shaking, crying, or screaming, while others moved with a strange elegance, unnaturally attuned to his instructions. By the end of the night, Lucien's dark satisfaction was evident. Not all of them would survive the training, not all would ascend to the state he promised. But some few had the spark. Finally, as dawn threatened the edges of the night, he gathered them once more. The children sat in silence, exhausted, terrified, and strangely exhilarated. Lucien looked at each of them with eyes that pierced deeper than any gaze should. You have seen only the beginning, he said. Tonight the shadows spoke to you. Tomorrow you will speak to them. And in time, you will understand that to survive, to truly exist in this world, you must embrace what others flee. You must become what they cannot even imagine. A silence followed. Then a small voice, quivering but defiant, said, Will we be like you? Lucien's eyes glimmered. He knelt, bringing his face level with the child's. No, he whispered, you will be worse. You will be better. You will be everything they fear. And with that, he turned, fading into the shadows of the chamber, leaving the children to sit with their new knowledge, the taste of power lingering in their veins, and the dark promise of what they were destined to become. The candlelight guttered one final time, and the shadows swallowed them all. The final choice, dark vampire. The night pressed down like a velvet shroud, thick and suffocating. Rain streaked the city streets, turning neon signs into trembling reflections and puddles. Cale stood on the edge of the abandoned cathedral's rooftop, the wind whipping his dark cloak around him like living shadow. Below, the city teemed with life, unaware of the storm gathering in the skies above, and the one growing in his chest. His hand hovered over the hilt of the obsidian dagger. It was heavy, warm, with a pulse all its own, as if it knew the choice that awaited him. He had spent weeks hunting, questioning, hiding from both humans and creatures of the night. But this night the end had arrived. Tonight he had to choose. From the shadows behind him, a figure emerged, fluid and silent. Seraphine. Her eyes, molten gold, pierced him with both accusation and longing. She didn't speak, she never had to. Cale knew she had come to witness, to judge, and perhaps to sway him. You know what must be done, she said finally, her voice a whisper of silk and steel. Cale nodded, though his throat felt tight. I know. You can't turn back after this, she warned, stepping closer. Her presence made the hairs on his neck stand on end, both a warning and a comfort. Once you embrace it fully, the darkness, it won't let you go. Not ever. He clenched his fists. Darkness. Light. Humanity. Immortality. Each path bore its own curse. He had always feared the thirst, the hunger that had clawed at him from the moment of his first transformation. But now he feared something greater, regret. Below, the cathedral's doors stood open, an invitation. The elders waited inside. The council of vampires who had ruled the city in shadows for centuries. They had offered him power, promised him dominion over the night if he completed the ritual. One step through those doors and he would renounce everything human within him. One step back and he would face exile, or worse, death. He felt Seraphine's hand brush his arm. The touch was electric, setting fire to nerves he didn't know were frayed. You don't have to do this, she murmured. You can walk away, but you must be certain. Cale swallowed. How could he be certain? Certainty had become a luxury. One lost the night he tasted blood from another's vein and felt life itself pulse through his fangs. He had seen death in its most intimate forms. He had killed and mourned in the same breath. He had loved and destroyed all in the same night. His eyes closed and memories flooded him. The laughter of a childhood friend, the warmth of his mother's hand, the first time he had felt love and hope intertwine. And then the blood, the power, the insatiable hunger, the promise of immortality. He opened his eyes. The city spread before him like a web of veins. Every light a heart beating, every shadow a secret waiting to be claimed. The hunger was gnawing at him, but it was not the hunger that made him hesitate. It was the fear of losing himself. "Cale," Seraphine said, stepping closer. "I won't lie to you. If you go through with this, the man you were, he's gone. But the world, our world, will be yours to command. You could bring order or chaos, but it will never be the same again." He glanced at her, at the flicker of gold in her eyes, and felt a pang of something he could not name. Well, guilt? Regret? Or perhaps it was the memory of who he had been before the hunger had claimed him. The wind howled, tearing at the edges of his cloak. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the cathedral like a cathedral of bones. The ritual awaited. The elders, draped in ceremonial robes, chanted in a language older than the city, their voices low and resonant. The air thrummed with power, vibrating in Cale's chest like a second heartbeat. He stepped forward. One foot onto the edge, another into the darkness. The city below seemed to hold its breath. Seraphine's hand lingered on his arm, warm and fleeting. "Remember," she said, "the choice isn't just about power. It's about who you will become. Will you be the monster or the master?" Cale's heart pounded, not with fear but with the weight of inevitability. The dagger in his hand seemed to hum, a pulse that matched his own. He could feel the darkness rising within him, a tide threatening to drown all traces of the boy he had once been. And yet, a voice in his head, soft, human, pleading, whispered for restraint. The last fragment of his mortality clung to him, fragile as a moth's wing. He could still choose, but at what cost? The elders raised their arms in unison, the ritual reaching its crescendo. Fire ignited in the air, shadows dancing like living things around the stone pillars. Cale felt the pull, an irresistible force promising power, immortality, dominion. He could feel himself tipping toward the abyss. Then he saw her, Seraphine, unwavering, waiting. Her eyes reflected not just the gold of her own hunger, but the humanity he feared he had lost. He thought of every choice he had made, every blood-soaked night, every fleeting glimpse of who he used to be. With a guttural cry, Cale made his decision. He drove the dagger into the stone floor, not in submission, not in power, but in defiance. Light exploded from the obsidian blade, searing through the cathedral and scattering the elders. Their chants died in their throats. Shadows screamed and recoiled, twisting in agony as Cale drew the darkness into himself, but not to succumb, to dominate, to control it instead of letting it control him. The wind died. Rain ceased. Silence reigned, broken only by Cale's ragged breathing. He looked at Seraphine, her expression a mixture of awe and fear. "I choose," he said, voice hoarse but resolute, "to walk the line between what I am and what I was. I will not let the darkness erase me." For the first time in centuries, Cale felt whole. The hunger remained, but it was tempered by will, by choice. He had embraced the dark without surrendering to it. The city outside continued its restless life, unaware of the storm that had passed above. But Cale knew the night had changed forever, and so had he. Seraphine stepped closer, placing a hand over his heart. It beat not with fear but with strength. "Then let's begin," she whispered. "The world is ours to protect, or to haunt." Cale's lips curved into a grim smile. The final choice had been made, and the dark as ever would follow him, but it would no longer own him. The night stretched on, infinite and patient, as a new kind of vampire emerged. One who walked the edge between shadow and light, between monster and master, carrying both the hunger and the heart. Legacy of the Dark Vampire. The night air was thick with the scent of decay as Celine made her way through the ruins of Eldrith Keep. The once mighty fortress lay in crumbling silence, its jagged stones silhouetted against the pale light of a swollen moon. Shadows pooled like ink in the broken corridors, and the wind whispered secrets of the past, stirring echoes of lives long extinguished. Celine's fingers traced the cold, damp stone walls, and she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. Stories of the dark vampire had haunted these lands for centuries, tales of a being who had wielded darkness as easily as breathing, who had commanded armies of the night and whose thirst had brought kingdoms to ruin. And now she was here to uncover the truth. A faint shimmer of light drew her to a half-collapsed chamber at the heart of the keep. The air grew colder as she stepped inside, and the silence thickened into something almost tangible. At the center of the room lay a stone pedestal, and atop it rested a blackened tome, bound in cracked leather that seemed to writhe under her gaze. She approached cautiously, her instincts prickling. The book radiated power, old, dangerous, and alive. Celine's hand hovered over the tome. When she touched it, a jolt of energy surged through her, and the shadows around her seemed to pulse in response. The pages fluttered open, revealing symbols and script that twisted and danced, refusing to be read by ordinary eyes. Then, almost imperceptibly, the words reshaped themselves, forming language she could understand. To the seeker of shadows, the legacy is yours to bear. But beware, darkness is a hunger that cannot be sated, and power without control devours the soul. The warning made her shiver. Celine had known the risks, yet the lure of the dark vampire's knowledge was irresistible. She began to read, absorbing the secrets of ancient rituals, forbidden magic, and the true nature of the vampire she had been hunting. The dark vampire was not born of the night, the tome revealed, but had been forged by it. In a time when mortals wielded fire and steel, one man sought to conquer death itself. He bound his soul to darkness, merging flesh with shadows, becoming something neither living nor dead. His reign had lasted centuries, each victory staining his legacy, until betrayal from within shattered his empire. But his essence endured, embedded in the land, in the ruins, and in those foolish or brave enough to awaken it. Celine's heart pounded. If she could master the knowledge in this tome, she could harness power beyond any mortal's reach. Yet, as the book whispered its temptations, she felt the weight of the dark vampire's presence pressing on her mind. It was as if the ancient being watched her from the edges of reality, measuring her worthiness. A sudden noise, like the scraping of claws across stone, broke the stillness. Celine froze, straining to hear. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall and lithe, with eyes that gleamed like molten silver. A shiver ran down her spine. "You dare touch what was never meant for the living?" The voice was both melodic and menacing, echoing in the chamber. Celine gripped a dagger at her belt. "I seek the truth," she said, steadying her voice despite the rising fear. The figure laughed softly, a sound that seemed to scrape against her soul. "The truth? You think the truth is free of cost? Every shadow you summon, every power you claim comes at a price. Are you willing to pay it?" Celine met the gaze without flinching. "If it means ending your reign of terror, I will." The vampire tilted his head, studying her. Then, with a grace that seemed unnatural, he moved closer. "Many have tried to end me. All have failed. You are different. Perhaps curiosity is a stronger weapon than courage." He extended a hand, pale and cold as marble, and the shadows around him swirled like smoke. Celine felt an almost magnetic pull toward him, a whisper in her mind that promised power, knowledge, and immortality. Her instincts screamed to resist, but the temptation was undeniable. "You seek to destroy me," he said, his voice a velvet trap. "But what if I offered you a choice? To inherit my legacy, to embrace the darkness instead of fearing it. You could wield power that kings and gods only dream of." Celine's mind raced. She had spent her life hunting monsters, yet here stood one offering her the ultimate weapon. Could she risk it? Could she resist the hunger for power that pulsed like fire in her veins? "No," she said finally, her voice trembling but resolute. "I will not become you." The vampire's expression flickered, a shadow of amusement crossing his features. "Bold," he murmured. "Few have the strength to refuse. Strength, and perhaps a spark of wisdom." He stepped back and the shadows recoiled. "Then the legacy must continue without you. Remember this night, Celine. Remember the choice you made. The darkness always waits, and one day you may face it again." With that, he vanished into the shadows, leaving only a cold echo behind. The chamber seemed to exhale, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. Celine fell to her knees, breathing heavily, the tome still open before her. She had learned much, yet the knowledge carried a danger she could scarcely comprehend. The dark vampire's legacy was not just in power, it was in the seduction of the soul, in the subtle corruption of even the strongest hearts. Rising, Celine closed the book, locking its secrets away in her mind. She knew she could never destroy the dark vampire entirely. He was more than flesh, more than spirit. But she could prepare, she could resist, and she could ensure that when the shadows rose again she would be ready. As she stepped out of the ruins, the moonlight glinting off her blade, she felt a mixture of relief and foreboding. The dark vampire's shadow lingered across the land, a silent testament to the darkness humans could never fully conquer. Yet Celine walked forward, a light in the encroaching night, determined to forge her own path, one that would honor the living without succumbing to the allure of eternal darkness. The legacy of the dark vampire was a curse, yes, but perhaps it could also be a lesson. And Celine intended to learn from it without letting it claim her soul. Above, the wind carried a whisper, faint but unmistakable, "Until we meet again." Celine tightened her cloak and pressed on, the weight of history heavy on her shoulders, yet the fire of resolve burning brighter than any shadow. Darkness was never the enemy, ignorance was. As the dark vampire comes to an end, remember that every legend exists to explain what we once feared. Lucien's story isn't about immortality or blood, it's about knowledge, restraint, and the responsibility that comes with understanding. If this story made you think, question, or see darkness differently, then its purpose lives on through you. More stories like this are waiting in the shadows, stories that teach, challenge, and transform. Thank you to viewers. Thank you for listening, supporting, and keeping intelligent storytelling alive. Until next time, stay curious,